Over the past couple years, we've seen an influx of new games, though in reality these titles are simply being re-released for gamers to play on next-generation consoles and for PCs. Companies are revisiting video games old and new to revise what they believe to be the definitive experience, an experience game developers believe to be improved by the technology of the 8th generation consoles. A prime example of this would be Grand Theft Auto 5. 7th generation consoles ran the game at 30 frames a second at 720p resolution, inadequate performance. The 8th generation re-release of Grand Theft Auto 5 completely blew its predecessor out of the water. Graphics and visuals were overhauled in terms of resolution and texture quality, all while maintaining a 60 frames a second cap. However, with all these newly imported re-releases, some feel like a disappointing recreation of a game that we all loved in the first place, making these titles feel like shallow cash grabs on the part of the developer. It's almost like we're in a re-release revolution, in which games are being pumped out with our favorite characters on the box art just to have us relive certain nostalgia. This could either be childhood nostalgia or playing the franchise for the first time. For some of us, this is either hit or miss. My name's Luke Seaboch, and let's talk about the art of remastering. Before we get into this topic, we need to understand the different types of re-releases. We have remasters, definitive editions, reimaginings, HD remakes, and some outliers. Firstly, let's talk about HD remakes. Odds are that if you played a game, whether or not it be a childhood favorite game like Crash Bandicoot or Age of Empires, you can almost expect with certainty that an HD remaster or a definitive edition will be released for that game. Think about it, name a game off the top of your mind that you loved as a child. If you're anything like me and grew up with a PlayStation, you might have named Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, or even Crash Bandicoot. Each of those games have either a remastered edition out currently or will be released soon. This type of remaster is a re-release of a game with HD support along with some updated visuals. While these games might be targeting audiences of older gamers who played these games as a child, these remasters are often released just so that new players can participate in a particular experience that they missed out on. These are some of the few remasters that I would consider acceptable for companies to release and for consumers to purchase. That is not to say that they are the only acceptable re-release archetype. There are other categories of re-releases that should definitely get some recognition, but then again, there are those whose existence confuses me. Let's talk about the good re-releases of a game. Re-releases are exactly what they sound like. Re-released games of the current or last generation. The only reason why they're being released is due to the fact that either they sold well or that fans demanded a re-release. For example, we can look at The Last of Us PlayStation 4 edition and Grand Theft Auto's PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 re-release. Due to their success near the end of the 7th generation consoles, it would be a no-brainer to re-release them for fans to enjoy on the new console. These new consoles support higher resolution, higher quality textures, and smoother gameplay. This type of release is similar to the HD remake in that it includes better resolution and quality, but these specifically are made for the newer console. Moving on, we have Game of the Year versions of games being re-released. Game of the Year editions usually shipped with the DLC strapped along with the game. For example, we can look at Oblivion or Fallout New Vegas as Game of the Year editions, as well as many more. This is happening all the time on Steam and other retail outlets. There's a very thin line between re-releases and Game of the Year editions that differentiates the two separately. While re-releases usually have updated graphics for generation hopping, Game of the Year editions are usually released for the same console as well as the original with all the DLC strapped onto it. Finally, as far as I know, we have remasters or reimagining versions of games. The recently released Doom and Ratchet & Clank 2016 are perfect examples. What they did was take an original game like Ratchet & Clank on the PlayStation 2 and Doom for the PC and remade it from the ground up, adding new graphics, animations, levels, and more. The main reason why the difference is so substantial is because of a term called generation hopping. Generation hopping is the creation of a game being made on a new console generation that was previously made on an older generation. For example, Ratchet & Clank on the PlayStation 2 looked nice as is, but due to already having an HD version created on the PlayStation 3, Insomniac Games had to think about all the new technical implications that comes along with the new capabilities and benchmarks that comes with the PlayStation 4, and created Ratchet & Clank 2016. This is a great reimagining of the original game, creating new levels and recreating old ones, all while not straying off the proven path that makes Ratchet & Clank so unique. Now that we know what each version of re-releases are, we can start talking about which games are done correctly and which are not. Let's start by looking at Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 was originally released on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 late into that console's lifecycle. Because of the success of the game and low hardware capability that the 7th generation consoles had, they made a re-release of the games to be played on more current consoles. With old technological benchmarks being annihilated due to new, stronger technology, one could really see and react to the new graphics and gameplay that the new Grand Theft Auto 5 released and opened up to us. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Dishonest games, promising to add more to the core game, but in reality, adding a few new features and add-ons for a quick buck. Skyrim, when released on November 11, 2011, was a masterpiece. The graphics were great at the time, and the modding support provided countless hours of extra gameplay. Now, over 5 years later, Bethesda wants to re-release the Skyrim Special Edition. As shown, it includes new lighting and other features that mods have already created. I feel like this is a huge letdown for fans of the series. Is this just profiteering by Bethesda? Why even re-release Skyrim in the first place? Other games in the franchise like Morrowind and Oblivion could really benefit from a remaster. Another non-promising re-release is the Dishonored Definitive Edition, which was very recently released for consumers to purchase. The reason why this was released was so that PlayStation 4 players and Xbox One players could play it, and it is at this point that it seems like a very obvious cash grab, and it feels very scummy to do. With the release of Dishonored Definitive Edition, this counts as the third retail re-release of Dishonored, following the original retail release and the Game of the Year edition. While the 30 FPS cap is unlocked and new shaders are added, this edition simply does not offer anything new or noteworthy when compared to its predecessors. I can't help but feel betrayed by Bethesda for doing this, and with the Skyrim Special Edition coming out, this feeling is only exacerbated. One could argue that Ratchet & Clank has 3 releases as well, with the original Ratchet & Clank trilogy released in 2002 to 2004 for PlayStation 2, the HD Collection released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3, and the Reimagining released in April of 2016 for the PlayStation 4. Yes, Ratchet & Clank was re-released 3 different times, but each different iteration had new features included into it, allowing us to play with new graphical capabilities due to hardware limitation, and gives us new levels to explore, thus making it a more honest re-release. It is this sort of careful and measured improvement that makes a re-release good, not the addition of minor changes for the express purpose of to profit. In conclusion, re-releases should be expected from developers that publish games that have sold well. It isn't bad for the game industry as it introduces new players to a game that perhaps they would have missed out on in their childhood, or due to the console exclusivity of a given game or franchise. Re-releases can also breathe life into a franchise, something we've seen with Ratchet & Clank for the PlayStation 4 and the new Doom, both of which are excellently executed, expanding each game's life cycle a bit longer. Personally, I'm all in for good re-releases, as it allows me to replay a game that I once enjoyed immensely as a child and relive the nostalgia with a new graphical setting. As long as developers remember who their dedicated fans are, and that they don't completely botch a game or try to resell the game as new, then I'll support those games and the developers time and time again.